Bear down, fam. A national analyst just threw out on national radio that the Bears should send 2 first-round picks to Atlanta for a running back who is already an all-pro, and when I first heard that clip, I almost dropped my coffee. Honestly, the proposal sounds as tempting as it is dangerous, and today I'm going to walk you through why my fan heart wants to scream yes while my analyst brain is grabbing me by the collar. Darnell Wright has a clock running over his head. And Ryan Poles just gave the strangest answer I have heard from him in months about that extension. I am going to break it down word for word, because there is something strange hiding in there. And to close things out, the Jaguars head coach threw a little jab at Caleb Williams this week, Ben Johnson answered, in a way that put a huge smile on my face. But what happened afterward on the practice field is what actually matters here. All of that is coming up now. Let us get into it. Okay, sit down for this one, because the debate that blew up this week in the national media around the Bears has nothing to do with what most of you expected to hear today. It is not about pass rush. It is not about the offensive line. It is about whether Chicago should send 2 first-round picks to Atlanta to land Bijan Robinson. Let us start with the context, because if you only hear the headline, you miss half the story. Jason McIntyre, on Colin Cowherd's show, The Herd, proposed that the Falcons follow the model the Panthers used when they moved on from Christian McCaffrey a while back. The idea was almost provocative. If Atlanta is willing to move their star runner, why not the Bears? He said, basically, that giving Caleb Williams the jet fuel of Bijan Robinson could close the division right there. And bro, on paper, that sounds spectacular. Now, let me be fair to the idea before I tear it apart, because it does have real football logic, and I do not want to dismiss it lightly. The Bears finished 3rd in the NFL last season in rushing yards per game at 144.5 yards. And they did that with DeAndre Swift, who earns $8 million a year, a mid-tier contract, and with Kyle Manangai as a rookie who blew past any reasonable expectation. Between the two of them, they combined for over 1,700 yards and 14 touchdowns. That is an elite-level ground game built out of clearance rack pieces. Now imagine pulling that base out and dropping in a runner who already plays at the level of Bijan Robinson, someone who wins games by himself between the run and the catch. Ben Johnson already proved in year 1 that he can design a brutal ground scheme, and with Robinson, he would have a force multiplier no team in the NFC North easily matches. But here is where my face starts to scrunch up, and I am not going to hide it. I think this proposal, as it stands, is the wrong move for this roster at this specific moment. Not because Robinson is not good, he is a beast. I am saying it because this team's problem has never been ground production, and spending 2 first-round picks fixing something that already works sounds to me like buying a second fridge when your roof is still leaking. And here is where this connects to something we have been hammering on this channel for months. Chicago's pass rush remains the biggest structural weakness on this roster. It is not a one-season problem, it stretches across multiple off-seasons, and Ryan Poles has a fairly well-documented pattern of failed attempts to fix it through the trade market. Before this Robinson proposal, the Bears were already linked to a possible blockbuster for Max Crosby, the Raiders' edge rusher. It never happened. And according to reports, the real reason was that Poles did not want to give up 2 first-round picks for Crosby, the exact same price, the exact same number of picks, that the Ravens actually did offer the Raiders before that deal fell apart on its own. So look at the irony here, because to me this is the real heart of the story. The same general manager who said no to paying 2 first-round picks for the best edge rusher on the market would now, in theory, have to consider paying the exact same price for a running back, at a position where this team is already producing among the top 3 in the league without spending a single dollar of draft capital. That does not add up to me, economically or from a football standpoint. And look, this already burned me once. A couple of years back, I hyped up a trade that never happened and ended up looking like a clown on camera. So I have learned to be suspicious of these radio proposals until there is real smoke. I could be wrong, and if I have to eat these words in October, I will do it happily. But for me, that combination of price and need just does not close. There's a third point I feel is being underrated in the public conversation. If the Bears genuinely had 2 first-round picks available for a blockbuster this year, the right position to spend that capital on is still the pass rush, not the backfield. Another proposal circulated these past few weeks about a trade for Josh Sweat, the Cardinals' edge rusher. And honestly, that conversation interests me way more than the Robinson one. Sweat can single-handedly change how rival coordinators protect their quarterback. That is the kind of piece that raises this team's ceiling in January, when pass rush matters more than anything else. Look at how this fits the full pattern of Poles as a general manager. He is a GM who has shown, trade after trade, a real aversion to paying full market price for defensive line. We saw it with the failed medical trade attempts involving Odingbo and Jarrett in previous off-seasons. We are seeing it now with Crosby. And if this contention window with Caleb Williams at the center only lasts, I do not know, 3 or 4 more years before his next contract eats the cap differently, Every offseason that passes without solving the pass rush is an opportunity that does not come back. Now, to be fair to McIntyre, there is one condition under which I would actually get on board, and I will say it straight. If the real price ended up being a single first-round pick plus a lesser pick, instead of 2 full first-rounders, the math changes completely. Then we would be talking about a move that adds a massive offensive ceiling without sacrificing the capital Chicago needs for the structural defensive line problem. But at 2 full first-round picks, the exact same price they already turned down for a world-class edge rusher, this is a shoemaker sticking to his shoes. If Poles walks away from this conversation, and I think he will, that will be the right call, even if it stings a little, not to see Bijan Robinson in navy and orange running behind Darnell Wright. And this connects directly to the point above, because if the Bears genuinely want to keep draft capital and cap space free for the pass rush down the road, they first need to handle something urgent at home: the Darnell Wright extension. Tackles never get the love they deserve in fan conversation. Everybody talks about quarterbacks and receivers, but the guy protecting the blind side, or in this case the right side, is the reason Caleb Williams is still standing upright. So let us give this the seriousness it deserves. Wright was selected with the 10th overall pick in the 2023 draft. Since then, he has started 49 of a possible 51 games, with only 2 absences from minor injuries. In 2025, he was named to the second team All-Pro. For a right tackle, that kind of consistency is rare to find in this league. The Bears already exercised his 5th-year option for 2027, worth around $19 million. But that option is not a long-term solution. It is only a bridge, and the offensive tackle market exploded this year. Laramie Tunsil of Washington broke the ceiling in March at $30.1 million a year. Penei Sewell has a contract worth $112 million total, with $43 million guaranteed, though he is now moving to left tackle. Brian O'Neill of Minnesota signed for $96 million over 4 years. Luke Godick of Tampa Bay closed at $90 million over 4 years. That is the neighborhood where Wright should be negotiating. And here is the number that genuinely gives me pause, and I will admit it openly. SpotRec calculated Wright's market value at a 3-year deal worth $63.15 million, an average of $21.05 million a year. That number sits considerably below the real comparables I just named. And that is where the tension starts, because if Wright and his people are looking at what Tunsil, O'Neill, and Godick earn, and Chicago's offer starts closer to the SpotRec number, that gap could be the real obstacle behind the delay. About the quote from Poles that made noise this week, he said, word for word, "There's a window to get a deal done. At some point, we have to go play football. So we will figure that out." I do not like smoothing things over when something sounds strange. And this sounds strange. That quote is ambiguous in a way it should not be, coming from a GM who has spent 3 years building this relationship. He does not say, "We are close." He does not say, "I am confident this gets resolved this week." He says, "We will figure that out," which in negotiation language usually means there is still real distance between what both sides are asking for. Wright, for his part, was much clearer in his own press conference. He said he knows he will be in Chicago for a long time, hopefully his whole career. That is the kind of public line a player drops when he wants to gently pressure the front office without sounding confrontational. It is almost an elegant way of saying, "I am already ready to sign, the ball is in your court, buddy." And here, Poles' historical pattern matters because it connects to something we already flagged as recurring on this channel: delayed front office decisions. Poles has a track record of closing extensions right during training camp, as he did with Cole Kmet and DJ Moore in previous years. So this is not necessarily a full-blown alarm, it is simply this GM's operating style, a little maddening for those of us who want certainty now, but proven. The real clock here is the season opener against the Panthers on September 13th. If there is no deal by then, Wright enters the season under the uncertainty of his final 5th-year option campaign, and on a roster that wants to shield Caleb Williams through his entire development window. That is a risk Chicago should not want to take. My personal read, and I could be completely wrong, is that the deal gets done probably within the next 2 or 3 weeks, somewhere between the SpotRec number and the Tunsil and O'Neill comparables. But if this stretches past mid-August, that is when I would genuinely start to worry, because it would mean the gap in numbers is bigger than anyone is admitting publicly. And to close things out, something that started as a fun rivalry jabbing ended up connecting directly to what is happening at Hallis Hall right now. Liam Cohen, head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars, fresh off winning the AFC South, went on 1010XL radio this week to say he loves that his team flies under the radar while all the media attention goes to Caleb Williams and the Bears. He said, word for word, that if he pulls up the NFL website, he will probably see 40 pictures of Caleb Williams and nothing about his own players, and that to him, that is beautiful, because he does not have to manufacture motivation for his guys. Fam, I get the strategy, and honestly, it is a little funny to me too. Every NFL coach reaches for the underdog narrative to fire up his locker room, and Cohen is not lying. The Bears absolutely dominated the national conversation last year. But when Ben Johnson was asked about it in his Friday press conference, the answer was surgical. Quoting this word for word because the moment deserves it, "We're the #1 regression candidates, so I think we've got plenty of motivation ourselves." He added that they have already talked to Caleb about handling the attention, that he is used to it. I love this as a piece of communication. Johnson did not attack Cohen directly. He turned the narrative inward, using the fact that a huge chunk of national media projects regression for the Bears this year as the actual locker room fuel. It is smart because it converts outside skepticism into internal purpose without sounding arrogant or giving Jacksonville any more oxygen. Almost a masterclass in how a second-year head coach already knows how to handle a microphone. But words alone do not win football games. And what happened on the field during day 3 of training camp is what actually answers whether that confidence has real substance. Caleb Williams and Tyson Bagent stole the practice, according to several reporters on site. Williams threw his first interception of the summer during red zone work, picked off by Jalen Johnson, and honestly, that would have made me nervous a year ago. But the interesting part, and this speaks to real growth, is that he bounced back immediately and closed the practice with a 2-minute drill that ended in a touchdown to Colston Loveland. And speaking of Loveland, that connection is getting genuinely dangerous, to the point where I cannot help smiling while writing this. During one stretch of practice, Loveland caught 3 of Williams' last 4 passes. That is not a one-day coincidence. It is a trust relationship being built in real time. And if it keeps growing at that rate, opposing defensive coordinators are going to have a serious problem to solve in the red zone this season. Now, 2 smaller stories from this same training camp that connect to everything we talked about today. First, the left tackle competition took a strange turn. Kieran Amagaji got most of the reps with the first team on day 3, after Braxton Jones had those reps the first 2 days. But Amagaji had a rough practice, Austin Booker beat him several times, and forced Williams out of the pocket. And look, this gives me some optimism about everything we talked about in the first story. If Booker is flashing like that against his own team, that is a small but real sign that part of the pass rush solution might already be developing inside this roster, without needing to spend 2 first-round picks outside. And second, Kyle Monagai's absence. Last season's surprise breakout runner who rushed for 783 yards and 5 touchdowns as a rookie is missing camp for a second straight day, with no publicly confirmed reason. I do not like speculating about a player's health without real information, so I am not going to invent theories here. I hope he's doing okay as a person before anything else, before any fantasy roster spot. What I can tell you is that Salvon Ahmed is taking advantage of the chance, with good reports in his place. If this stretches on, it is a story we need to follow closely, especially after everything we discussed today about whether Chicago's backfield genuinely needs outside reinforcement. And there you have it, fam. A day of pure, real football debate. A Bijan Robinson trade that sounds spectacular in fantasy, but for me, does not pass the test of what this roster genuinely needs. A Darnell Wright extension closing in on its deadline with more questions than answers. And a training camp showing, practice after practice, that the connection between Caleb Williams and this new generation of offensive weapons is more real than any regression ranking could ever predict. Look, I could be completely wrong about the Robinson thing. If Poles surprises everyone and closes that trade at a reasonable price, I will be the first to admit I was wrong, gladly, on camera, no drama. But until that happens, my position stands. This roster's next big move has to be on the defensive line, not in the backfield. Bear down, always. If this gave you something to think about, hit the like button, subscribe, and tell me down in the comments. Would you make the Bijan Robinson trade at 2 first-round picks, or would you rather Poles save that capital for the pass rush? I want to read every single answer. See you in the next one.